Hey friends, hey, I could not be more excited about the fact that you are watching this video right now. And I mean that wherever you find yourself, whether this is the first time you're really thinking about missional communities and what it might be like to be a part of one, whether you're currently thinking about maybe starting a missional community, or whether you're already doing it somewhere down the road with a group of people following after Jesus, living on mission together. Wherever you find yourself, I couldn't be more excited about the fact that you are in this headspace thinking about this. And the reason for that I say that is, well, one, because Jesus is King. He is Lord. And He is at work in our midst every second of every day and inviting us to join Him. And as a result, I don't think there's anything in this world that is more powerful or has the potential to be more transformative than a small community of people who are committed to following in the way of Jesus, committed to doing that together, and committed to one another as you do that together, and committed to joining Jesus on mission in a particular place and time. I don't think there's anything more powerful in the world. I think that is the church when it's at its best. I think that's the story of the early church. I think that's the modern church in its most beautiful stripped down form. And I think that has been the story of human history and what has largely shaped it in its best moments. And so I couldn't be more excited about this is the conversation that we're having. So here's the plan. Here's the deal. So Commonwealth, for those of you who are part of Commonwealth, we are starting missional communities. Some of us have been doing it for some time. Some of us are brand new to this conversation. Some of us are down the road and experimenting currently. But wherever you find yourself, we wanted to create a resource that's kind of given in biteable forms, small, short videos that simply speak to certain elements of what it looks like to live on mission in community together. So this will change, this will grow, this will evolve. And as questions arise, as we want to put certain things in front of you, we'll just shoot another short videos that you can come watch at any time in biteable chunks, videos that perhaps you can watch with your missional community if that's helpful, videos that keep you pointed true north and putting one foot in front of the other in the best way possible. So in this first video, what I wanted to speak to is what is a missional community and what is not a missional community. Let's start with what is not a missional community. A missional community is not a small group. I am a pastor who hates small groups. Not your small group, not the one that you love, that you were part of for years, that was so good for your family. That one was great. I just hate all the other small groups. And I'm overstating myself a little bit, but here's my frustration with small groups. Small groups almost always become self-involved. The group becomes the win. It's rarely tethered to any kind of mission or vision outside of itself. And so it just becomes about us, right? Oftentimes in a small group, the mission is community, right? That's the goal, that's the purpose, that's the plan. It's us, it's what's happening in the room. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his classic book on discipleship, talked about the fact that those, ironically, the people who love community often are the ones that end up destroying community. Why? Because oftentimes those who set out looking for community, right, that is a self-serving motive. We often love the idea of community in our heads more than we love the people in front of us. And also, it's just incomplete. It just is, right? Tim Keller talks about, he said, community without mission is toxic. And I think what he's getting to is we were created for so much more than to sit in a circle and talk about ourselves while God is doing all this beautiful work all around us, right? So that is a huge difference between a mission community and a small group. It's not a small group. Secondly, a missional community is not a Bible study. Now, we love the Bible. We love God's Word. I love the Scriptures. I think that it needs to be central in our personal rhythms, just as it needs to be central in our communal rhythms as we do this with other people. But a Bible study, whether it means to or not, oftentimes the goal becomes information. It's just about knowing more. It's about learning more. And for us, the goal is not information, right? The goal for all of us and for this world where God is taking it is transformation, right? And so where a Bible study might study the person of Jesus theoretically and say, well, in theory, I think this is what it means, and in theory, this is what it might look like to follow Jesus in this way or to respond in obedience to this. In the missional community, we are looking at that same Jesus, but we are applying the scriptures in real time, right? It has a life-on-life quality to it. We're not studying theory. We are studying the living King and asking, all right, this is what the King says. This is who the King is. This is what the King does. So what does this mean for us? How are we going to respond? How are we going to obey? And then we obey and we respond. It's not a Bible study. Thirdly, missional community is not a weekly meeting, right? That's how we often structure our church stuff, right? To keep everything clean and rhythmic, it's an hour and a half on Thursday or whatever. A missional community is not that. It's a lot more than that. And the reason for that is real life, on life stuff does not fit into an hour and a half at any point in time in your week, right? There are things that come up that are unplanned. There are sicknesses, there are tragedies, there are opportunities, there are changes and adjustments that need to be made. Relationships, you can't microwave them. You can't cram them into an hour and a half on Thursday night. It's just not going to work, right? And so in a missional community, if you're going to live in the way of Jesus together, that's going to take just a lot more than an hour and a half meeting, right? There are birthdays, right? There are watching one another's kids. There are impromptu coffees because I can tell you're not doing well, right? Or what have you. There are date nights and football parties and Halloween celebrations, you know what I mean? Or fall festival. I'm sorry. You get what I'm saying. It's not an hour and a half weekly meeting. Your missional community, if you do it right, if you follow Jesus together, it's going to be dynamic, it's going to be fluid, and it's going to come at you in all different kinds of ways of being together and following Jesus together. Fourthly, a missional community is not exclusive to adults. Another big difference between missional communities and, say, most church small groups, right? We want the kids out of the room, we want them away so the adults can have adult conversations. Now, there's a time for that in missional communities, but there's also plenty of times where we want the kids with us, right? We want them to be with us as we are following Jesus as disciples, as we're making disciples. For my kids, I'll tell you, some of the things they love most is the missional stuff. They love joining us as we're cooking meals. Like last night, we cooked meals for 3 different families and went and dropped them off, and they delivered them with us and hung out with those families throughout the night. They love baking cookies and blessing somebody who needs a word of encouragement. They love writing notes and cards to people who need a kind word and need loving on. They love being a part of practicing biblical hospitality and hosting people in our home. And they also love being honored and valued and cared for by people who are not their parents, right? And I think that's something that we need to rediscover as we do this, is asking, how do we do this with our kids in the room? Maybe not all the time. There are certain times when it's more appropriate for the kids to be on the trampoline and doing their thing while the adults speak. But how do we involve them in the natural rhythms of following Jesus alongside other people? Fourthly, missional community is not a social activist group. And by that, what I mean is a missional community is not just, let's say, feeding the hungry. Although it can be oriented around that. So just a word of clarification. It's very possible, let's just say that God's given you a heart for families that are heavily invested in foster care, and knowing how exhausting that is, and God has given you a burden to love them, to bless them, to give them a night off, to resource them, encourage them as they do a beautiful but very hard thing. That is beautiful. And you can start a missional community that's focused on loving and serving foster care families. But the thing, underneath the thing, is that as we do that as a community, we're wanting to make much of Jesus and make disciples as we go, right? And so that's a distinct thing. The one act of blessing, while it's a beautiful thing, reflective of the heart of the Father and a kingdom-worthy cause, as we do those things, we also want to be sure to clarify and intentionally know and commit that we are making disciples of Jesus and making much of Jesus as we step into this tangible need. A missional community is not an affinity group, meaning a missional community is not, we don't start a missional community that's exclusively for any particular people. A word of clarification on that is, many missional communities might start focused on a group of people. So let's say we're starting a missional community that was focused on this CrossFit community over here. Or you're starting a missional community that's focused on South Knoxville mountain biking clubs and people that are into mountain biking, right? Both worthy causes, millions of other examples of how that thing might start. But here's what's going to happen, and here's what you need to prepare your heart and head for. As you do that, as you create a safe community, a safe space where people can belong and be loved and explore the person of Jesus and follow the person of Jesus together, as you do that, there are going to be people who join you who are not CrossFitters. And there are going to be people who take you up on that and find their way into the room who are not mountain bikers. Right? If it's only an affinity group, they don't belong in that space. But for us, right, our heartbeat in missional community is we are creating a safe space and constantly pulling up another chair at the table of grace, right? Another chair at the feast of the Lamb, and then another chair and another chair and another chair. And so while you might start focused on one community, we need to make sure that our hearts are flexible and adaptable to love and to begin to disciple anybody and everybody that God brings around the table. Amen? Right? Okay, so there's a lot of other things I could say about what a missional community is not, but let's shift gears and talk about what a missional community is briefly. I've already touched on a number of the things, but in its most elemental form, right? Its most stripped down form, a missional community is essentially an extended family living on mission together. I mean, at its heart, it's family. It's my favorite metaphor for missional communities, right? Because family, an extended family, right? Family doesn't fit into an hour and a half on Thursday, right? Family is all the time. It's all week long. They're not going anywhere. Even family, I mean, you got weird Uncle Bill who's embarrassing and socially inept, and he takes a little bit more grace sometimes, and other people feel like we need to give them grace. But we still love him, right? We still love him. We walk with him because he's family, right? Families are adaptable. They have to be. Families are messy, but there's beauty in the mess. I love this. This is a definition of missional community by Brad Briscoe. It's a little wordy, but I like it. It's pretty good. He says this: a missional community is a committed group of Jesus followers, the size of an extended family, right? Empowered by the Spirit to participate in God's mission of redemption in a particular neighborhood or network. That's a missional community, right? It's an extended family following Jesus together, committed to Jesus, committed to one another, and committed to a shared mission.